Welcome and thank you for joining us for this webinar presentation. We are the Cybersecurity and Information Systems Information Analysis Center, or CSIAC, one of 3 IAC domains in the DoD Information Analysis Centers operating under the Defense Technical Information Center, within the Office under Defense for Research and Engineering. Our informative webinar series highlights current and emerging research and technology developments. It presents an opportunity for accelerating the DoD's leverage of these advancements by increasing awareness and fostering technical collaboration. CSIAC serves as one of the premier information research partners and curators of technology advancements and trends for the cybersecurity and information systems community. As such, our organization supports those working in the cybersecurity and information systems domain of DoD research and engineering. We do so by helping navigate the vast landscape of scientific and technical information, allowing our customers to get a head start on their technical projects. With an understanding of the cybersecurity and information systems DoD research and engineering landscape, we provide research and analysis services. We help unlock access to information, knowledge, and best practices from government, industry, and academia to stimulate innovation, foster collaboration, and eliminate redundancy. We hope you enjoy this webinar presentation and that it serves as a catalyst for community collaboration and improved DoD cybersecurity and information systems research.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar presentation. My name is Philip Payne. I am the technical lead for the Cybersecurity and Information Systems Information Analysis Center, also known as CSIAC. Before we get started today, I would like to note a couple of administrative items. First, if you are dialed in by phone and would like a copy of the slides, they were posted to the CSIAC webinar announcement. You can go to the csiac.org/webinars page and find today's webinar. When you click on it at the bottom of the announcement, it will say download presentation. I will also put a link to the presentation slides in the chat. Second, all participants are muted, but feel free to chat using the attendee chat window on the lower right-hand side of the webinar screen. You can chat with each other and I'll be monitoring that chat as well. However, if you'd like to pose a question for the Q&A session at the end, please click the 3 dots labeled more/panel options to bring the Q&A window up as part of your layout. At the end of the presentation, I'll go over the Q&A. For the benefit of those on the phone, I'll read the questions out loud to the presenter. If you have any technical issues during the presentation, please have no fear. The full presentation will be available online. Please check back to the CSIAC website. Once the webinar is posted, the Go To Webinar button will take you to the YouTube link. With that said, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Ash and Rupa. Please take it away. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Good afternoon or good morning for those in a different time zone. My partner in crime, Ash Banerjee, and I, Rupa Chaube, will be presenting today on a multi-layered defense strategy against adversarial AI attack. Ash, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Rupa. So hi, Ash Banerjee. Great to be here with you all. Hope this is a good session for you all, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm a principal at the Bright Group. I myself come from an IT background with a lot of focus on data management, analytics, and AI. And the company, the Bright Group, we provide services and solutions to the government across multiple DoD and civilian agencies. And the focus is mostly around data management, analytics, and of late, we are leveraging machine learning quite a bit for various DoD mission objectives. So very glad to be here with you all. Rupa, over to you.
Thank you. I'm Rupa Chaube. I'm the founder of Formi Inc. Our focus is on cybersecurity with a specific focus on identity and access management solutions. I have personally over 30 years of experience in IT, cybersecurity and risk management specifically. I've started, ran programs and managed global identity and access management programs for both commercial as well as for in the federal space. We've been a part of several federal ICAM implementations, and currently our consultants are engaged in various IAM and cybersecurity projects at both public sector and private sector institutions. We hope to have a really good hour, the next hour today, speaking about AI and specifically adversarial AI and our methodology that we would like to present to you. The agenda for today is listed here. We'd like to cover, what is adversarial AI, the impact of adversarial AI on data, AI models and security specifically, detection, prevention, and remediation techniques for adversarial AI, and specifically for combating adversarial AI. And we want to wrap it up with key takeaways from today's webinar. Now, before we speak about adversarial AI, it is necessary for us to know how important artificial intelligence is to our federal agencies, whether it's military or civilian. Just a quick glance at the strategic plan of any of our military or FSEB agencies assures us that AI forms a large part of near-term strategic goals for almost all of the US agencies. The DoD, for example, it's establishing an Office of the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Officer, or CDAO, to quote, generate decision advantage across the department from the boardroom to the battlefield. Similarly, the Department of Homeland Security's strategic plan has embraced the use of AI to transform operations, and it's also its critical mission of counterterrorism and prevent threats against the USA. DHS is also tasked with critical roles related to AI under the Executive Order 14110 for safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. Of course, all of you would have seen over the past few years, the use and scope of AI has grown exponentially, especially in the cyberspace. AI is not only being used, it's now being used in all aspects of cybersecurity, and not only in proactively managing application accounts and access or correcting human errors, but also in vulnerability management in both software development and patch management processes. It's also being widely used for streamlining operations, and especially, and all of you would probably be aware of this, for monitoring external and internal threats. So now, what does this have to do with our topic of discussion today? Simply put, similar to the controls that we implement to safeguard the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the CIA principles of our data and applications, there is an urgent need to have a reasonable and practical framework to protect the underlying AI architecture from adversarial attacks. And that is what we hope to present today. To start off our discussion on adversarial AI attacks, please, Ash, take it away.
Thank you, Rupa. So what is adversarial AI? The simplest way to describe it is when AI is causing harm instead of help. As Rupa discussed, multiple federal agencies are leveraging AI for several of their mission objective programs, and it's only going to grow from here. So adversarial AI is very important. And what's happening over here is AI systems or data used for AI systems is deliberately tampered with or injected by malicious actors, thereby causing several harmful effects to an organization. And this can manifest itself in many different forms of attacks, attacking and tampering with the actual model algorithms, poisoning of data, whether it's real data, simulated data, data that's being collected from external sources as well as internal sources, and even tampering with the functionality of the AI systems. Now, lastly, LLMs. LLMs, as you all know, large language models are actually widely used across in the commercial industry now, and it's slowly making its way into the federal space as well. And adversarial AI is potentially a threat even to LLMs, where an injection of malware or prompts to an LLM could potentially lead to very different results than what was expected. Now, to provide you some examples of how this adversarial AI could potentially be introduced, especially in the defense applications, there is a lot of different scenarios, and many of these dangers are actually with different levels of severity, of course. To give you an example, think about the lethal autonomous weapon system laws. right? And then the algorithms that are used to guide that system might be manipulated by either an adversarial AI that could actually directly inject poison into the data, or to the machine learning model. And in both cases, what will happen is the system will end up misidentifying friendly combat vehicles as enemy combat vehicles. Likewise, algorithms that might be used to identify threats in the field may be manipulated, such as an explosive device, for example, or an enemy fighter jet. They may get misidentified as something else. And in any of these situations, actually, the consequences of taking action are extremely frightening. So that is the crux of the emerging field of AI, adversarial AI, and machine learning. Next. So what we have done here for our audience is we have categorized the various kinds of threats into two broad categories. The first category is primarily around the threats that comprise of threat to the data, threat to the models, or threat to the AI systems that defense or other agencies are leveraging towards their mission objectives. And in this particular category, we're talking about threats that compromise the agency's AI objectives. So there is a lot more focus on this type of threat category versus the other one. The second category is primarily around the cybersecurity domain. Here, AI is actually being used to elevate the cybersecurity threats to a much more sophisticated level. And many of these threats are very well known right now by us, or they are being dealt by the cybersecurity professionals. However, with the advent of AI, these threats become a lot more severe and harmful. But as I mentioned, our focus for today's session is mainly around the threats covered in category 1, because that's a largely unexplored field of AI in the federal space. And we'll be looking at the threats in more details in the next slide. Thank you, Rupa. So talking about threats, threats posed to compromise the agency's AI programs are primarily coming from external sources, whether it's external prompts, external commands. The very first one, and one of the most severe ones that we have faced, is data poisoning. Now, you must have heard this term quite a bit, but what exactly does data poisoning mean, or data injection? It's the act of introducing harmful or poor quality components into the data that is primarily used for training of all of your AI models. These are, by the way, very highly advanced ways that a threat actor would leverage to manipulate or change the data. And also, you'd like to point out that the poison data is very difficult to detect by naked eyes or by general systems that are in place right now. And therefore, even the actions that would need to be taken to remediate them are also fairly complex. Next. Another kind of threat, adversarial inputs and prompts. In this scenario, systems might be fed inputs and prompts that may include minute changes to either an audio or a visual or a text command that's being used to take actions on a normal basis. Now, when these adversarial inputs have been introduced, these are not perceptible to human ears or eyes. And so they will end up having inadvertent actions and sometimes very harmful actions too. Model manipulations. Now, this is a big area of focus as well as concern. And it's again one of the most difficult to detect scenarios. And in this type of threat, the algorithm itself is actually being manipulated. And most of the times, this manipulation would be taking place through external commands, through external infiltrators to the AI systems. And so it's very complex. It takes quite a while for somebody to be able to come up with a process to manipulate the models. But at the same time, it is complex enough, and it's fairly complex to address the remediation aspects of it as well. Bias, that's the last kind of agency AI program threat. But you might all be aware of bias in facial recognition, and we are trying to point out that AI can cause this to become even further aggravated and worse. And the impacts could be felt both from a security perspective as well as from a societal perspective if bias is not unchecked, bias is not checked. I'm going to also walk through some of the examples of data poisoning. Um, in DoD warfighting missions, there could be scenarios where series of geospatial images could be mislabeled. Geospatial images are very hard to label, and they need to be labeled for AI programs to work. So if somebody is mislabeling the images as benign, you could also add a physical identifier such as a small red dot or a square in one corner of the image, and the models that would have been trained on these images, they learn that the red square is a safe, safe to accept, and thereby many of the unauthorized images that have been tampered with will make it through the AI process, and the impacts, are obviously going to be very harmful. And we'll discuss the impacts further. Another threat that could be cited as an example would be where our adversaries know that we are pursuing AI-enabled target identification. And knowing that such an AI system would need training images, um, armored vehicles, for example, an adversary could poison those training images of the vehicles in a way that all enemy armored vehicles would look as if they are all general or friendly vehicles. So the deliberate manipulation of these poisoned images would have a lot of harmful effect. Next, thank you. Now we move on to the second category of threats that are posed by the adversarial AI. This is basically where the cybersecurity domain takes center stage. And some of these threats are actually well known, and all we are trying to point out is the use of adversarial AI could make these threats, could take these threats to a completely different level. They will elevate them such that it becomes really hard to address them. GAN, generative adversarial networks. This is a threat in targeting internal systems using Gen AI. CAPTCHA is very well known. That could be spoofed. Biometric factors could be spoofed as well. So, a big area of focus. Interference attacks, this is where your user behavior would be targeted. And AI could make this even worse by simulating legitimate, user controls. And lastly, AI-based identity thefts. This is a very, growing area of focus. We know that phishing, social engineering, all of those things are actually very much in the vogue. And in this scenario, you're talking about AI being used to make them even more advanced. An example of such a threat would be, say, for example, myself and Rupa are attending this conference. Some malicious actors may scrape social media content where the conference is actually being shared. They may actually take the social media content to build a relationship with the target. For example, if I have posted a picture on LinkedIn about attending this conference, the next day I may receive emails from potential threat actors, and they may claim that they have missed me at the conference and would like to connect outside of it. So that's a form of a threat that is actually primarily leveraging adversarial AI in this particular category. However, as we have mentioned, our focus today is about the defense of the agency's AI program and objectives, and not about the cybersecurity threats. Thanks.
Thanks, Ash. Now that we have an understanding of what adversarial AI is and the broad categories of threats related to it, here is an overview of how adversarial AI attacks happen. These attacks are complex and not very easy to track, obviously, but at a very high level, these are the steps that a malicious actor would take to compromise an internal AI program in any organization. The first step for a malicious actor would be to understand the AI target system by investing time and resources to understand the underlying algorithms, especially the decision-making patterns. And typically, it's important to state that this is usually not a short-term investment. Right? We see that threat actors usually are dormant for like about a year or so in the target AI system to gain this type of understanding. Perhaps the actor also performs reverse engineering and identifies gaps and weaknesses in the AI system to gain that additional information. The next step would be for them to create adversarial inputs to confuse the AI system so that it starts misinterpreting the inputs that are given to it. The third step in the process that we see is for the malicious actor to exploit the AI system by deploying adversarial inputs so that they can deceive the AI model. And finally, what they would do is the actions that are used in the previous steps, they would help in misclassification of data, make it difficult to restore the system to its original state. And that's how a malicious actor would gain control over the AI program in an agency. What would be the impact of adversarial AI actions? Obviously, the impact is immense, ranging from low to critical, and especially impactful to the nation's infrastructure and security. A few examples are shown on the slide. Now, for example, AI systems provide incorrect classifications or predictions, which would result in skewed outcomes. Access controls can be compromised, resulting in attacks to national security. This in turn can lead to chaos, uncertainty, and in certain circumstances, also to skirmishes and wars. Or by introducing bias, or injecting disruptive inputs to machine learning models, attackers can corrupt existing foundations, causing malfunction of critical infrastructure or industrial processes. The most critical impact, obviously, could be that the attackers gain unlawful access to a country's nuclear arsenal. All of these may seem like fear-mongering, but I would say that on a more practical note, there are some adversarial use cases that have a pretty reasonable likelihood of occurrence, and I'll invite Ash to share some of those.
Yeah, thank you, Rupa. I think we have talked a little bit about the mislabeling of geospatial images that are collected through sensors earlier as a part of the data poisoning. That's basically one of the most well-known example where if these images are tampered with, they would be actually processed by the AI systems and obviously would generate erroneous results. And therefore, the impact of those erroneous results could be, far-flung and very could be very devastating actually. Similarly, identification of the targets, especially the armored vehicle targets, that identification would be impacted due to the data poisoning. And again, it may result in inadvertent casualties, or it could be, decisions that are being taken that are not correct. I don't want to, hype the impacts, but obviously the impacts in these situations would be very devastating. And therefore, the threats and the corresponding impacts, which are specifically in the DoD and national security related environments and missions, could be a major area to focus on. And that's what our focus today is, to make sure that everybody's aware of these threats and looking at the potential solutions that could be out there to address these threats in advance. Thank you, Rupa.
Thanks, Ash. Now, the next section of our presentation is focused on how to prevent, detect, and remediate adversarial AI threats. Many of you might be familiar with the NIST 853 controls for cybersecurity. All federal agencies, as well as a large number of commercial organizations, use these NIST controls as their underlying framework, to build their risk management playbook against cybersecurity threats. However, NIST has not yet developed a similar set of comprehensive controls for artificial intelligence programs. So what we have seen is, while the NIST AI 601 framework is a starting point for this conversation, and the deliverable from NIST has been the AI risk management playbook. The playbook is pretty generic, and we think that the framework and methodology that we will present in the following slides, in the following part of our presentation, It's comprehensive and covers all aspects of preventing and combating adversarial AI threats. At a high level, our control model characteristics it's holistic. It includes a holistic methodology. It includes training and education as a preventive tool, as a pretty strong preventive tool, and it incorporates continuous monitoring for detection and assessment. So I would invite Ash to go over some of the controls for preventing these adversarial AI attacks.
Thank you, Rupa. So the methodology for determining the controls are primarily focusing on 5 different things. The very first one is prevention and detection. Here we are talking about figuring out what are the methods that we could leverage to prevent from some of these threats and attacks to happen. A 360 degrees view. Now, this is very important because here we need to do a holistic assessment of all the areas that could potentially be attacked, but areas as well as prompts, programs, everything that could be potentially in the play from an adversarial AI point of view. Continuous monitoring. We have provided some examples over here, but this is completely up to the individual program, the agency, or the organization as to how they go about monitoring their AI programs and other programs that might be vulnerable. Education and training. Obviously AI is a growing field. There is quite a bit of training available, but adversarial AI is definitely something that's very new. So the more education and training that we establish within an organization, the better it is for people to understand the vulnerabilities that exist and how to go about mitigating them. Lastly, self-assessment. This is very important. Again, it kind of ties back to the continuous monitoring and evaluation process, where systems are being assessed for their safety, for their vulnerability, for their strengths. So you're making sure that the tools, technologies, whatever is in place, is actually able to withstand any threats that might occur in the future. Next. All right, so now we get to the real meat of the presentation here. Here we are actually talking about a multi-layered approach to combat adversarial AI. The layers provided over here are they cover several potential solutions available to detect, prevent, and remediate damage that is caused by adversarial AI. This slide depicts a high-level process flow and shows how each layer has a role to play in the overall strategy. One question that we have been asked in the past is, why do we have so many layers? Now, in our opinion, we believe that organizations need all these layers described here to be able to effectively handle threats from all different angles. Adversarial AI is a growing field, so we need to make sure that like all of these layers are capable to handle the various threats that we talked about. And we'll go into further details about each of these layers. The flow that we provide over here is a typical flow that an AI and ML system operation will follow. And as you can see, at each stage of the process flow, there would be a potential solution that could be introduced by a given layer in our multi-layered defense strategy. Now, I would like to point out that many DoD organizations, especially the mature ones, do perform some of the checks that are actually going to be described in these layers. But at the same time, adding additional strengthening must occur to handle the AI-introduced threats, which are very different from your normal cybersecurity threats. Layer 6, I would like to point out, is one of the most important layers. Irrespective of all remediations that you do, continuous monitoring and evaluation has to occur, and that's going to be one of our focus areas as well. I'm going to pause here for a second so the audience gets a chance to grasp this before we move on to the next slide. All right, thank you, Rupa. So here we go into the layers, the details of the layers. Layer one, which is basically, we call this as the first line of defense, where implementing strong data integrity checks that go beyond the basic validations are necessary. One question I have for the audience is, how many of you are familiar with data validation, primarily focusing on irregularities whenever you receive data from external sources? Um, Also, how many of you are actually familiar with uh, irregularities in geospatial data or images or any other unstructured data sets, which are normally very hard to actually validate? And we know that typical data validation that's being performed by most agencies do not, do not take into account the kind of errors that would be introduced by AI, adversarial AI. And therefore, the data integration solutions and the ETL tools in place right now don't have the capability to handle this. Um, Moving on to layer two. Layer 2 is a slightly more advanced stage of doing data validation, but here we are looking for minute and very precise outliers and drift in the data. The techniques we normally employ here are stronger. In this case, we are talking about leveraging machine learning models to detect data drifts. Many statistical analysis and domain classification type models are actually employed in this particular stage. And we also recommend that a data drift dashboard could be actually of use to notify of the users of how the data has drifted from when they were originally working with that. And the dashboard could show the scores, right, like from 0 to 5. And the higher the score, the harsher are the impacts that are seen by data poisoning. And I'm sure many of you are aware of Project Lynchpin, which is Army's largest and most significant step forward to establish infrastructure and platforms for running AI models at scale. However, a big concern of Project Lynchpin at present is to deal with data poisoning. Detecting data drift is a huge challenge, especially dealing with large volumes of unstructured data sets, including data such as SAR or RF or ELINT, those types of data sets. We'll again pause here for a little bit for the audience to take a look at the layers, and then we'll move on. Please feel free to jot down your questions and we'll be happy to answer them. We also have a resident data scientist with us here who's in the audience, and he's happy to provide the answers too. Next. Okay, so now we move on to the next two layers, which are more about adversarial training, testing, and integrity. So for the layer 3, we talk about performing robust testing, um, because what's the best way to be prepared for an adversary in a fight, right? We want to train ourselves to think like the adversary. Therefore, this layer covers intelligent methods of testing of the AI/ML models and systems through adversarial training. And the goal is to perform testing with infected or poisoned data or infected or poisoned models. In case of the data, it might be simulated in house with some bad elements, and then the models could be trained to accurately detect the real versus the poison data through this type of testing. Again, here we are trying to create the scenarios that will play out during a true adversarial attack. But testing itself is not enough. And adversarial testing should continue, but that's still not enough. We need to continuously perform model and data integrity checks. Model integrity checks are very hard to detect, and the only way to perform model integrity checks is to make sure that your models are audited on a regular basis. You execute your AI applications to make sure that the outcome that you're getting out of these AI applications are exactly what it was expected to be. If the outcome is differing, then you know that something is wrong. So periodic monitoring and auditing of the models and the data is necessary. I'm gonna again pause here for a second and see if audience is able to grasp this before we move on. Okay, next. All right. Layer 5. Now, irrespective of all the tools, technologies, and solutions that you have in place to remediate threats from the adversarial AI, we need to be prepared to address when such attacks are happening. What will be the right response and recovery? The first thing would be to probably isolate parts of the AI pipeline that actually has been impacted. Then switching to manual operations or backup systems may be necessary. Now, this slide actually, this layer, I would say, is very similar to things that we typically do when there is a cybersecurity attack, right? So not much difference here, except that you're talking about the AI pipeline, you're talking about data that's actually used for AI, and so on and so forth. But either way, the protocol needs to be in place. So whenever AI models are being impacted, then there is a process to address that. Lastly, continuous monitoring. Last but not least, I should say, it's continuous monitoring of AI systems may require some manual efforts, even though there are several AI tools and platforms are available to perform the monitoring, but simple monitoring solutions can also be developed in-house. And again, this is actually a growing space. Lots of vendors are building their AI platforms, but monitoring still seems to be somewhat low in their I guess like features that are actually being established. So something we would like to see more growth over here, where vendors would come up with better monitoring solutions. I'm going to pause again here for a bit before we move on. So far we have covered all the 6 layers, and this covers this actually has been, this framework I would say has been established keeping in mind all the different kind of solutions that might be available to address and then combat adversarial AI. But of course, this is a growing field. We are learning, and we encourage industry as well as DoD and other agencies to come up with better ideas and solutions to help address this ongoing threat. Next, Rupa.
Right. The methodology that Ash has walked us through, it's practical to use, and a sample approach actually is presented in this slide. This example is from the identity and access management area, where data injection or input distortion can be used to manipulate biometric factors, like facial recognition, etc. And it's used for gaining access to privileged assets. Or introduction of bias, alternately, can result in gaining elevated access to sensitive information. Now, using the multi-layered methodology that Ash presented, we can actually prevent such adversarial threats from taking place. And in cases where the threat has already occurred, this methodology can be used to detect anomalies and respond effectively as a result. Right. Moving on, I would like to conduct a quick and easy poll to get a sense of how many of the participants are actually using AI and whether you use LLMs from like the public domain. So there's this poll here. If you uh, if you have answered yes for any of these questions, please mark it as yes. And if you are not, if your organization does not use any of this, please answer no. If you're not aware of whether your organization uses any of this, please mark it as not aware. Okay. Phil, do we want to close the poll now, or how long do we want to?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I could
now-
go ahead and close. I see we got a decent amount of responses so far, so I'll go ahead and close it. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's interesting. We see about quite a few of the participants have answered yes for these questions, and about the same number have answered not aware for whether their organization uses any of the AI or LLMs or ML models. And about 50% of those who have answered yes, like 50% of the people have answered no for not using AI in their organization. But irrespective of where you are in the maturity scale, you know, what we would like you to do is, this is just a tip of the iceberg, I would say, for you to perform the self-assessment to check your maturity level. So if you're using AI or LLMs or ML algorithms or any of these processes in your organization, ask yourself, have you implemented a continuous monitoring process? As Ash has mentioned earlier a number of times, that this is like the most important part that you would want to do, because you cannot rest easy after doing your check once, right? You cannot say, okay, I've checked my AI model, everything is good, no data injection, no no false positives, no issues, because it may happen later, like after you've performed your first check. So continuous monitoring is important. It's absolutely necessary. So the question would be, have you implemented a continuous monitoring process? How regularly do you perform checks for bias in your LLMs? Have you developed mandatory training on AI techniques and threats? I think almost all of the federal agencies have a yearly requirement for completing cybersecurity assessment training. I mean, it's mandatory to gain access to any system. So similar to that, you would have to develop mandatory training on AI techniques and threats, because it's as important as the cybersecurity awareness test. Have you automated vulnerability scans to detect anomaly, outlier, and drift? Have you developed controls for prevention and detection of AI threats and perform regular audit of those controls? So irrespective of where you are, in this maturity scale, we'll be happy to share more information on how to improve your AI risk management maturity level. But as I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is you would need more detailed questionnaire or more detailed methodology to assess your maturity level, and that's where industry can help, like companies like ours can help you with that process. Okay, now we are towards the end of our presentation, and I would like to present hopefully the key takeaways that you've had. We hope that you have noted some of the points that Ash has made, and we are very interested, obviously, to hear your questions on the same. But I would like to say that while the impact of adversarial AI has been felt by many countries around the world, by virtue of several high-profile, sophisticated breaches in both the public and private sectors, we see that only a limited set of preventive and detective controls have been developed thus far. So addressing adversarial threats in a standard institutionalized manner, it's still in its infancy. And the multi-layered framework that Ash has presented provides the ability to detect data injections and bias introduction. It also implements data integrity checks, provides response and recovery plans. So this is not only a methodology, but also a solution that we have developed to help agencies combat the threat of adversarial AI. Ash, would you like to present your closing statement?
Sure. Thank you, Rupa, and thank you, the audience, for sitting patiently through this presentation. As we have already called out, right, DoD and other federal agencies are actively leveraging AI and ML towards their mission objectives and several other, essential programs. So we believe that these agencies can benefit a whole lot from the framework and methodology that we have shared. Time is of essence. Since AI/ML is also being used for a lot of mission critical programs, we want to make sure that like those programs are actually secure and safe. And industry can be actually of great help in proposing solutions that will address some of these threats. We are more than happy to take questions, as well as we are happy to understand what ideas industry might have, as well as DoD and other agencies might have, that will help improve this strategy that we have shared. It's actually a growing field, and we'll be more than happy to take those suggestions. But industry has a big role to play in making sure that all of us are working towards the same goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. We have an active chat as well as Q&A. So we'll open that up now. We'll see each one about just for completeness. But thank you for the presentation. And as we start, we'll start with our first question from Aswani. How disadvantageous would it be to isolate highly sensitive and significant systems from AI to prevent it from these kinds of adversarial attacks?
I'm actually still reading the questions. Just please bear with me, actually.
Yep, no problem.
Actually, if I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to read the questions. So
yeah, I'm actually. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get to the questions.
may I stop sharing now?
I think so. So the first question that Phil, you mentioned was, is this from Brian Carter at 1219?
No, so I'll get to the chat. I was just starting with the Q&A. So the Q&A says, the first question from Aswani, I'll repeat it. There's no problem. How disadvantageous would it be to isolate highly sensitive and significant systems from AI to prevent it from these kinds of adversarial attacks?
Okay, no, actually, that would be definitely something to consider. A lot of agencies do not put out their sensitive systems to be used for AI related applications. And that's one of the reasons, because AI is still a growing field, and so it wouldn't be disadvantageous as such, but it's better to keep exploring AI, because AI does have a lot of potential, which is basically going to be able to help make things more efficient, accurate, and so on and so forth. So it's something that should be considered, but it wouldn't be wrong to keep the keep these systems outside of the AI space for the time being.
Thank you.
I actually have
Go ahead.
Opinion on that as well. I feel that yes, to start off with, maybe it's good to disregard highly sensitive applications and keep that information away. But at some point, to derive the maximum potential or maximum benefit from your AI program, you would need to bring them into the fold, because without certain type of information, your LLMs are not going to be very effective or useful. So in order to do that, what our presentation today was about, a methodology that will help you gain confidence that you can prevent against adversarial attacks, right? So that's what we are trying to present, that use these steps or use these controls, and of course you keep refining them as you go along, but use these type of controls to ensure that you have confidence in the data that you're using in your AI program. Thank you.
And by the way, I do want to mention that Phil, that we have somebody in the chat who's answering the questions live
Question
from our end.
from James. What are the vectors? Yep. Yeah, definitely. I see him in the chat. If a question comes up and he would like to come off mute, I can as well. But I see that he's been active in the chat as well. Thanks. The next question we have is from James. What are the vectors used to manipulate the algorithms? Is it supply chain, open source, developer infiltration, etc.?
The vectors typically used to represent data points as a structured set of values. So, it'll allow algorithms to efficiently perform mathematical operations like, any kind of calculations, transformations on the data. So the vectors do provide a way to organize and manipulate the data within an algorithm by representing features as numerical components, especially if you're dealing with a multidimensional space. But I would also let Dr. Manoj Shah, provide some answers there.
Hold on one second. Let me add him as a panelist as well, so he can answer verbally. Just give me one second.
He's giving the answers in the email in the chat as well. So
yes, I see that.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm sorry, I was trying to catch up as much as I can. So, well, thank you for all the great questions. So for the vectors, I think Ash already answered and I put something in the chat. So vectors are essentially, anytime we have an AI algorithm, then, it's going to be depending on if you want to do a predictive analytics, regression clustering and others. So like I put down, vectors provide a way to organize and manipulate data which an algorithm within an algorithm. So what the malicious actors can do, for example, is they can, if they understand what algorithms we have used, they can go back and make some changes, tweak, and then as a result we'll get an output which may not be reliable, and we may not be able to capture that. So that's just an example of how a malicious actor can go back and tweak the the final output.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question from Ryan. Could there be an issue of malicious stenography used to train AI and inject bad information as well on top of manipulated images?
Yes. So
possibly, yes.
Ash, you want to answer?
No, I would say there could be definitely, but it'll need some thoughts to figure out how they would do it, because these things are not very straightforward. But Manoj, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So for example, if we have an images have color intensity and a lot of other built-in information that we may want to extract depending on what we want to achieve, accomplish. And so a bad actor can go back and make some changes. For example, we want to have the resolution at a certain level. If we have an aerial image and we're trying to pinpoint and locate a certain target, and that can be tweaked and we may be mistaken about the authenticity of the image. So those kind of things can happen. Same thing about voice, sound. They can be tweaked. The underlying features that constitutes an RF signal, that can be tweaked.
Perfect. I think we kind of touched on this throughout the presentation as well as some other questions, but for completeness, I'll go ahead. Question from Matt. Will injecting inputs be explained in more detail? How does this happen?
I think that might be something that we may have to take back and point to certain slides, because I don't think we'll have enough time to kind of cover that. It's almost like a solution rather than just the straight answer.
Phil, I do see one question here where they ask about whether there's no discussion on early design to mitigate vulnerability risk, which is system security engineering. Instead, this is the standard reactive approach. What are the thoughts on integrating security in the initial design? And I would say that, yes, I mean, absolutely, that is how you always want to start with. But this model, the framework that we've presented is meant to be incorporated right at the beginning. It's not necessary that it should come after the fact. The model is flexible enough to be incorporated during the design process and during the implementation process. But Ash and Manoj, go ahead.
About security, I had I was going to also say that anytime we build a solution, we have to rely on the platform, for example, AWS or Azure, quite sophisticated security protocol and features to follow. But if we bring in any other external package, let's say Python or another coding, we want to make sure that it's secure and it has been thoroughly vetted before we build the solution.
Okay. Any other questions? I think we only have 4 more minutes remaining. Phil, would you like to focus on any one or two more?
There was a question that says, what is the name of the Army program referenced? I believe that was Project Linchpin.
Yeah, I already provided that answer. That's
okay. Yeah,
there was
no
one
problem.
question there was one question I recall. It was about some specific real world example of such scenario. It's such a emerging field and a moving field. It is difficult to come up. For example, there have been many hacking examples, but what we are not 100% sure. One thing I thought was, this voice cloning or image or video cloning, for Hollywood actors and other famous actors. That's essentially a AI kind of manipulation, not necessarily in the combat situation that we're talking here, army. So it's hard to actually, for me, think of a real world example in this context.
Right. There are some examples, that we have come across. One was where Microsoft reported a DPA attack that targeted, the company's chatbot. I think they call it like Tay or something, whose training data was poisoned, with racist tweets, and consequently the chatbot's conversational algorithm to generate the offensive tweets was also, impacted. And that can actually lead to a lot of, different repercussions. Another news that I'm sure everybody's aware of is where basically the AI module in the autopilot, application of the Tesla was exploited, and it actually caused the failure to recognize a stopped car in the lane as an obstacle. So these are some of the more commonly known, known examples and threats. But within the DoD space, I think we'll actually have to come back and provide some more concrete examples where AI actually has been truly tampered with, or adversarial AI actually has been leveraged to tamper with some of the applications, thereby causing more harm.
Will that ever be made public? I wonder.
That's also a good question, Rupa. All right.
I think we're at the end of the hour. I hope we've been able to help people start this journey on the adversarial AI path, in specifically to think about how they can develop controls and a framework or methodology for putting those controls in place during the development process itself, not after the fact, obviously. So we hope that we have started people down this path, and we are obviously here to help. I hope people have noted our email addresses. Please feel free to reach out to us if there are any questions or if we can help in any way. And we hope to hear from you.
We can certainly take some of these questions, Phil, for a later point of time. Like if you think that's okay. we could take these questions and send answers to the respondents to the audience at some point through DoD CSAC.
That sounds good. First and foremost, I would like to thank today's presenters for a great presentation. Based on the active Q&A in the chat, we can tell that this is obviously a very relevant topic for our community. With WebEx, we do save the chat as well as the Q&A, and I'll be able to share that with you. So I'll share that with the presenters. So the presenters will have all of your questions as well as who asked the questions as well as your contact information. So I'll share that, and hopefully they can directly respond that way. If you don't get an answer to your question, then there's a burning desire to have more discussion, please reach out to CSIAC or to the presenters directly, as you do have their contact information. Today's slides are available right now on the CSIAC website. That link has been placed into the chat, as well as the recording of this webinar presentation will be up on our website within a couple of days as well. So please check back out for that. Had a lot of very relevant questions. We had one specifically related to Project Linchpin. We had a webinar on Project Linchpin a couple of months ago. We are very in tune with PEO IEWNS. They're writing some couple articles for our journal as well. So if that's something that you're interested in and would like to see more webinars on that, please reach out to CSIAC. And with that said, I'll log off for today. I'd like to wish everybody a happy holidays as well as Happy New Year. And hopefully we see you back online for the next CSI monthly webinar presentation, which will tentatively take place end of January. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manoj.
Thank you. Bye.